Tonight's game is huge for Mizzou. Getting enrollment up is the school's #1 priority right now, and having thousands of eyes on your basketball team, that certainly doesn't hurt that mission. This is something he mentioned in his 100 Days address yesterday, talking about experiential learning. Now, experiential learning, that's exactly what it sounds like, simply just learning through experience, something like an internship, for example. Now, in these 3 particular cases, they say that a violation does exist because of these weeds and overgrown grass that you're seeing here where I'm standing. This is just over the Moreau River, and you can see behind me just how incredibly steep this area is and how big of a drop that is into the water. We actually haven't been able to get up here all day because the family has been in the area. We saw what appeared to be the family of both of the victims, and we wanted to keep our distance because they were incredibly distraught, as you can imagine. If you follow me over here, they sent out another alert saying that the suspect could possibly be in the area of Memorial Union. You can see that building over there. Now, that's when a driver in the northbound lane, which is the lane that's farthest from me right now, crashed into that teen because she didn't have any time to stop. Just within the last couple of hours, I actually spoke with Columbia Public Schools, and a spokeswoman tells me that 57 people, in fact, have applied to be on that committee. This verdict comes just days after the release of the results of a campus climate survey that found that 19% of the respondents at the University of Missouri experienced some sort of exclusionary behavior. President Choi has also said before that faculty retention, particularly at the University of Missouri, is a problem for the system as a whole, and they are currently looking for the subject. I'm going to step out of the way so you can see a little bit of what's going on here. This is a pretty big deal. We've been waiting for months to see how the UM system budget would finally shape up, and now we're going to get an answer. Yes, Ashley, that was all part of the plea deal. Horton pleaded guilty to both murder charges, and then the state dismissed 4 other minor charges against him. Now, I was in the courtroom when Horton admitted to killing Sherry Horton, his mother, and Joshua Griffith, his brother-in-law. When asked if he knowingly killed them, he replied with a simple yes and showed no emotion. Words don't seem to be enough to describe the depth of loss we have all felt. We contribute all of this to the hateful, cruel, and selfish actions of 2 people. Those were the words of Joshua Griffith's sister in her victim impact statement. Family members watched today as Dale Horton admitted to killing his mother and brother-in-law, standing stoically in front of a judge. Did he express remorse for the killings at any point?
No. No, not to my knowledge. The family has not suggested to me that he reached out to them to express any type of remorse.
At 37 years old, Horton will now spend the rest of his life in prison. The prosecutor tells me he believed there was enough evidence to seek the death penalty, but decided not to pursue it since the case could have dragged on for years.
The vast majority of the family wanted this state to go ahead and make that offer for life without parole. To bring an end, some conclusion to at least his part of the case.
Horton, along with Jennifer Grayson, were both arrested in connection to the shooting deaths in April of 2016. At that time, there was no motive mentioned in the shooting. The prosecutor says today's sentencing brought the family some closure.
I know for them, it was not a bad day. You know, it was a good day. It was a terrible thing to sit through and hear. It could have ripped their family completely apart, and they all been at odds with one another, but that's just not the case.
And as for Jennifer Grayson, court records show that she has a trial coming up in November. Just within the last 30 minutes or so, I also heard back from the Callaway County Sheriff, and he tells me that he still can't comment on a motive because her part of that murder case is still pending. Live in the newsroom, Melissa Toomey, ABC 17 News. It's no secret that the 2015 protests on campus led to some serious consequences for the university. But as one student told me today, we can only go up from here. One of the biggest changes, we now have new permanent leadership, and some of those 2015 headline makers are thousands of miles away.
In the name of Jesus! In the name of Jesus!
You're at the Office of Greek Life?
My name is 1950.
I'm resigning as president of the University of Missouri System.
2 years now to the day since Tim Wolf resigned. What pops into your head when I say that?
A lot of emotion. 2 years prior was kind of the climax in a way. It also kind of marked the place where we kind of hit rock bottom.
Erica Winston was only a freshman when the 2015 protests took place. She says she wasn't a central part of the protest movement.
At least for the people who have been here, we all felt the impact.
That impact still affecting the university today. Enrollment is at its lowest in at least 10 years, and Mizzou's reputation still recovering from that massive blow. But now there's finally permanent leadership in place after 4 different chancellors in under 2 years.
We have to focus on excellence. When you think about excellence,
it also permeates into our climate.
The climate still not great at Mizzou. A 2016 survey found that only 2/3 feel comfortable on campus.
Any student that makes it into Mizzou deserves to be here.
While there's still room to grow, students like Erica say the climate has improved.
There's a greater inclusive mindset on campus, and I see students taking a greater effort to understand people who might be a little different than them. So that's a huge plus.
As for the 2015 headline makers,
I need some muscle over here.
Melissa Click works at Gonzaga University. As of June, Jana Bassler is no longer employed at MU, and Jonathan Butler is apparently at George Washington University. I reached out to all of them, but didn't hear back. I also sent a message to concerned student 1950, but that wasn't answered either.
We made some mistakes in how we reacted to the student protests. It's not that they weren't serious, but we didn't do what we needed to do to maintain a sense of calm and a sense of dignity at the University of Missouri. You make mistakes, you have to pay for them.
Sheer desperation is about the only word that comes to mind to describe what happened. I just know, particularly with the minority community here, there was just such an outcry for listening ears.
The new leadership says they're willing to listen.
If you want to be successful, you have to have people trust that you have their best interests in mind.
If you don't get the proper treatment within your own organization, come to us, any one of us, and we will look into that matter very carefully.
That attitude is encouraging to the MU community.
The only place we can go from here is up, and it's kind of like that blind hope that we all kind of have to have.
Moving forward, Mizzou has to get enrollment back up. The campus climate will, of course, play a huge role in that. I traveled to Ellington, Missouri to find out what happens to a town when it suddenly loses its hospital. It's not just the economy and jobs that suffer. The consequences are often deadly. Christy Roberts and Karen White are both residents of Ellington, a town of less than 1,000 people. While it's not unusual for a town in Missouri to have a small population, one thing is unique about Ellington. It has to provide health care to multiple counties without a hospital.
It just takes the life out of the community. You live with a sense of fear that you just don't know, what if something happened, what would you do?
To make matters worse, residents got just 2 weeks notice before the Southeast Missouri Health Center in Reynolds County closed its doors in 2016.
Right off the bat, we lost 55 jobs. We were just devastated, and it's really impacted our community.
The Southeast Missouri Health Center was owned by Southeast Health. In its 3 years of ownership, Southeast Health absorbed more than $17 million in operating losses. Before it closed, fewer than 2 beds were filled on average at the hospital each day. Now, people in Ellington have to travel almost an hour to get to a hospital, a matter of life and death.
We had a police officer in December of last year that had a heart attack. He, no doubt, it was a young man, he was in his 50s, and deadly. He would have lived if we could have gotten him to an ER. I can come up with probably 5 or 6 people right off the top of my head that easily would have lived.
The lack of a hospital in Ellington is affecting everything in the community.
Some of the restaurants have said anywhere from a 20 to 25% reduction in their lunch crowd.
White says her clinic has had to absorb a lot of the care, not only in Reynolds County, but in the nearby Carter County, that's more than 40 miles away. Immediately, they had more than 2,000 extra patients. The county has 3 ambulances, but none are stationed in Ellington, meaning they could be dozens of miles from someone's call for help. One person told me he had to give his mom CPR while waiting for an ambulance that was 30 miles away.
And then from that point, they're having to go maybe a 45-minute to a 60-minute drive to be able to get somebody to an emergency center.
The closure of rural hospitals is a growing problem across the nation. From 2005 to 2016, 3 rural hospitals, including Ellington's, shuttered their doors in Missouri. The problem is worse in the South. In that same time frame, 7 rural hospitals closed in North Carolina. One of the big reasons, uninsured patients. Medicaid is also a problem. More than 50% of rural hospital closures happened in states that didn't expand Medicaid.
Not everyone who needs it has it. So then you face a lot of patients who don't have insurance, not just Missouri. I'm from Kansas originally, and it's as bad, if not worse.
The problem is also reaching mid-Missouri. In September, Fulton Medical Center nearly closed its doors before it was bought by Empower HMS. Officials say it was losing roughly $200,000 a month. That's about $2.4 million in just 1 year. The potential closure would have forced some Callaway County residents to drive 30 minutes to the nearest hospital. That's not an option in the case of something like a heart attack.
They have to be treated immediately, and getting them to a facility closer here in Fulton is definitely could be the difference between life and death.
Outside of emergency care, the economic development director for the Callaway County Chamber of Commerce says the presence of a hospital in a community has an effect on everything, just as Ellington has experienced firsthand.
If you don't have a hospital, you go from being like a first-class community down to maybe a second-class community.
Under its new ownership, Fulton Medical Center is by no means out of the woods. Leaders say the key to not going down the closure path again is to focus on what the hospital can do well.
Low patient volumes come from not having enough diversity in your programs.
You've got to pare down what you do. You can't be the Amazon. You can't be everything for everybody.
Leaders say it's going to take effort to get people in the door. They say there's a stigma surrounding the hospital that they need to help break.
There's people in this community that are well respected, and they're going to have to be some of the first ones through the front door. Till they see us doing it and some of the other people, it's going to be tough to get them to walk back in, I think.
In terms of a solution, experts say an expansion of Medicaid would certainly help. White says she's also pushing for freestanding ERs. In the meantime, towns like Ellington are struggling. The hospital building is tied up in bankruptcy. In March, it will be 2 years since anyone has used it. There's boxes over here. Like, these aren't your boxes.
No.
These are just trash.
While there's still hope for Ellington, other towns across the country haven't been so lucky as their services dry up.
They only survive if they can monetarily make a living at those. If they can't, they go away. And then that's where your small towns, dissolve or dry up over time. And we don't want that for Ellington. And we don't believe that will happen here.
Christie also said the overall health of their community has gone down. That, in turn, costs our state more money in the long run. Yeah, believe it or not, decreased state support for higher education is not exclusive to Missouri. In fact, it's a growing trend across the nation. So I decided to dig into the question of who should pay for higher education, the state or the student. I can tell you this much, it is not an easy answer. Sam Willow is a junior at Mizzou who's studying political science. He says he chose to attend MU because the cost made it the most practical option. Still, he will graduate thousands of dollars in debt.
It's terrifying. I mean, my dad is still paying off his student loans from law school. So, and the price has only gone up, and a law degree has become worth less.
Sam's story speaks to a greater trend across the nation as the burden of paying for higher education shifts from the state to the student.
Lower levels of state support that lead to higher tuition is a phenomenon that we're seeing all across the United States.
Statistics support what President Choi is saying. Since the recession in 2008, state spending per student has decreased in almost all 50 states. President Choi says he expects about $30 million in state funding to be cut from the UM system's core budget.
A $30 million cut is a significant cut to our budget. It represents, in essence, eliminating half the funding for UMSL that comes from the state. At Mizzou, it represents eliminating the School of Engineering and the School of Business.
There are a handful of states that have been hit with larger cuts, but our numbers are nothing to celebrate. In fact, the UM system says Missouri ranks 46th in per capita funding for higher education. In our neighboring states, per capita state spending is significantly higher. Missouri is also lower than the national average, but that hasn't stopped legislators from putting higher ed funding on the chopping block.
Medicaid is the largest component of the state budget. We've tried to make higher education a priority. But when it comes down to having to make a decision between paying our Medicaid bills or, spending on discretionary things like higher education, we have to pay our bills.
Another contributing factor, the 2015 protests at Mizzou.
A lot of the funding cuts politically was reactionary to some of the events that happened on the university. And I think that Mizzou still gets a lot of bad press for that.
Is there still resentment towards the university after everything that happened?
So I think that there is still some resentment. Yes, I think that there is. I would like for us to get through a couple months without there being some story about the university and something stupid that they did. That would help.
If the resentment is shared by cutting our budget, I'd like to ask you to reflect on the impact to our students.
In his first President's Report last week, Dr. Choi said he estimates the UM system's economic impact to be between $3 and $4 billion. So who should pay for higher education? That all comes down to who you ask.
The state support for higher education institutions is optional, quite frankly.
I think if we're cutting discretionary funding and we limit the amount that we're putting into higher education, I think it has somewhat of a domino effect in the future. With a less skilled, less able workforce.
An expert with the Columbia Chamber of Commerce tells me there is a direct correlation between the cost of education and having an educated workforce. Meanwhile, students and parents are feeling the effect as the state works to balance its budget.
Unless something drastically changes soon, we're going to only see this get worse.
So maybe we need to look at a better way to fund higher education. Maybe the best way to do that is to empower the students through scholarships to make the decisions. And maybe that's something we should look at.
And I have more from all of these interviews, as well as a breakdown of how tuition at Mizzou compares to other universities on our website, abc17news.com. Yeah, Lucas and Kelsey, and I want to make it very clear that MU officials couldn't really say anything. They couldn't confirm anything about Jana Basler's position. But if it were to be eliminated, it would be particularly significant since lawmakers actually called for her resignation after she was seen stopping student journalists on that video that you just saw during the November 2015 protests on campus.
You're at the Office of Greek Life?
My name is 1950. That was Jana Basler in the now infamous 2015 video that shot Mizzou into a negative national spotlight. She was placed briefly on administrative leave but returned to the university shortly after. Most recently, she served as the Associate Dean of Student Life. As of Thursday night, though, she is no longer listed on the staff page, so I set out to find out what happened. I'm Alyssa Toomey. I'm a reporter with ABC 17 News, and I was just wondering if Jana Basler still works here, if you could point me in the direction of her office.
You're going to have to go to the News Bureau to reach out to the News Bureau for any type of comment or any information about anything that's going on within student affairs right now.
Okay. Can you tell me if she's still employed here?
Have to reach out to the News Bureau.
You could go to the newsroom.
You guys can't comment on anything like that. The university says the operations merger will result in 10 to 15 layoffs. Some positions within the Student Affairs Division are also being eliminated. I spoke to multiple sources who say they believe Basler no longer works with Student Life. A spokesperson for MU says employees who are laid off will be given 2 weeks' notice or 2 weeks' pay in lieu of notice. He said an individual will still be in the system for 2 weeks. ABC 17 News has called and emailed Jana Basler for comment, but we haven't heard back. Reporting live on MU's campus, Alyssa Toomey, ABC 17 News. Yeah, Joey, actually just within the last 45 minutes or so, Jana Basler texted me back and told me that she's, quote, trying to sort things out right now and provide a perspective that will be open and honest. She said at the moment, she's not in a place to comment. Now, Basler is just one of the positions that could be eliminated within the Division of Student Affairs. A post on Mizzou's website that you see on your screen there says they don't know how many positions are being eliminated, but this is all part of a major shakeup in the division. We told you yesterday, Student Affairs will move more than 100 facility staff to the Division of Operations in an effort to save more than $1 million. An MU spokesperson couldn't confirm which employees are being let go, but says employees who are laid off will be given 2 weeks notice or 2 weeks pay in lieu of notice. Now, I'm of course going to continue to follow this story, and I'll bring you any new updates on those layoffs. Joey?